My name is Andrew Amann. I'm the CEO and founder of NineTwoThree AI Studio. We build AI products for established brands and funded startups. And you're listening to the DiscoPosse Podcast.
Like a pro. Fantastic. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to join today. I love the work that you're doing with 923. You've got an incredibly storied background, somewhere from nuclear submarine engineer to successful founder. You've been through exciting exits. You've moved into a lot of interesting spaces, business-wise and industry-wise. So there literally is so much we could go. We could do 8 hours and probably never repeat ourselves. So I'm really excited about the chat that we can have today. But Andrew, for folks that are brand new to you, if you don't mind, give a quick little bio, and then we'll jump into the 923 story to begin with, but then we'll go into the Wayback Machine and talk about how you got here.
Sounds great. So I was a mechanical engineer out of college. I worked on nuclear submarines for the first 6 or 7 years of my life. In those years, I helped with the design of the aft end of the submarine, and I got put up into the position to work on their supply chain. At that time, I was working on nuclear parts for both valves and submarines, and I created a patented chip that tracks parts in a manufacturing floor. And so that was my first introduction to software. I had to write all 3 patents for the United States to grant us that patent, and I had to calculate the math of how it works to triangulate parts when there's obstacles or objects or other parts in the way of the part you're trying to track. And so we were the first ones to come up with 11. There was 14 variables that everyone always knew about. 11 of them are known, and we estimated the other 3. And we were accurately able to track where parts are located on a floor, put it on a giant television screen, and I wrote all the software with some help from my team and some other consultants to make sure we could track those parts. And so with that, I thought, great, it's for another company. I, would love to see this through fruition. So I tried installing it in power plants around the world. Went to France, went to Scotland, and tried to install this technology there. And it was a long process. And even though I came up with the idea, I didn't own any of it. And so I said, what else can I use this chip for? And I thought it was a great idea if 2 people shook hands in conferences, that those 2 people could transfer the information between the 2 phones that are in their pocket. And so I came up with that idea, tried to source the parts out of China to make it work, using kind of the same Bluetooth chip that I had used in tracking the manufacturing parts. And my co-founder, I had just met my co-founder at the time. He said, "You're an idiot. We should be doing QR codes. That's the next wave." And of course, he was right. In 2012, we created the QR code business card, and that took off. We were the first ones to kind of transact 2 pieces of information using that QR code. They weren't embedded into the camera yet. We sold that company in 2016, which led us to building products for other people from 2016 till now. And that's how we got into AI. One of our first products was tracking baby heart rates inside of a crib and trying to predict when that baby will wake up.
Very cool. Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I imagine there's a lot of lessons along the way. It's funny, like when I read when you read all the startup books, and it's always like there's one chapter, but it covers a 3-year period, and you're like, there's probably a lot that happened in here that's super important, but it didn't necessarily move the story. But as fellow founders, we can probably dig in on some really wild lessons. So let's talk about 923, and so what is the kind of problem you aim to solve, and how has the company evolved since the founding?
Yeah, sure. So in theory, it founded in 2012, but we started building for other people in 2016. And at that time, there was really a rush of people trying to build mobile and web apps. So our AI department was rather small, but the mobile and web apps had taken off. So we built those products from 2016 all the way to about 2019. And we tried to become a venture studio in the middle of it. We built 14 startups ourselves. We had 5 CEOs managing one of those 14 projects, one of them being AltarLive, which is still on the market today, doing very well. And some of the other products we've sold, ended, closed down. But we realized we're better at building for bigger companies because we have a larger opportunity to get customers on board. We don't have to do the sales and marketing, but also it's just more advantageous for us to be that product team that can go from 0 to 1 or take a product from 1 to 100 and have the opportunity to build for millions of clients without having to start at 0. And so I think our agency as a whole, one of the two things I'm most proud of is, first of all, we've had incredible retention rates. In 2022, we had 100% retention rate. In 2023, we had 92% retention rate. And so that retention rate just shows that we love what we do. The products that we're producing are generating return on investments now in like weeks sometimes, and even months instead of years. And so it's really, we've hit our really tipping point of building great products with millions of customers on those end products for really great clients. And our website shows the types of clients and the caliber of projects that we're putting out. And I'm so proud of the team. I'm so proud of the journey. And I'm so proud of like being in this market at this time, because it's a lot of fun to build with AI.
It really is a blessing to be in our industry every day. And I always say, like, every day, this is now the most exciting day of our world, right? Like we have such incredible opportunities, and it's very noisy, which is unfortunate, especially when we're trying to tell, stories about companies and products. People always, that sounds like something I've seen. But realizing that there is an incredible amount of pie to be sliced up. And when you talked about like apps, a lot of them are ephemeral, but in the sense of like years, like an app may be very successful for a year, and then it starts to trail off just because use cases change, or they may move their business to another form factor. But that's actually not necessarily a failure as much as just that was a point in time that solved a specific problem, and likely it's what did they do to parlay that customer base into something else. So I don't even see an app that no longer gets used as an end to a company. It may just be a transition period that we don't hear about necessarily.
Right. And I'm my biggest, bring to the company and the products, and why I get brought into a lot of these products, is I love business models. And even if an app has a product market fit within a business model that's producing revenue, that does have to adjust as the customers and consumers adjust over time. One of my favorite examples, that it's not one of our clients, but Gas Buddy is such a great example of adapting to the industry, because they created gas prices, and you would just navigate. Back in the day, we all didn't know what the gas prices were while driving, like they do show on your dashboard. So you'd have this app specifically to show you, it's $2 on the right side of the road, and it's $2.50 on the left side of the road per gallon. And so you would predict, you would kind of like navigate your journey based on Gas Buddy data. And there wasn't too much of a revenue stream there, but what they truly found as a revenue stream is working with the insurance agencies and trying to figure out, as a person navigates, can they sell that data to the insurance company? And so as you grow with business models, especially as apps change over time, it's great to bring somebody like 923 back into the mix, because we have seen so many business models adapt and change, and then we can help them into that next level, or that phase 2 approach like you're talking about.
Yeah, there's often we bury the lead in applications off the time. And it's funny because I've even talked to engineers, and quite often they're very specifically focused on a user story or something they've got to do in a product or a platform or an app. And then like you almost want to tell them, like, you understand there's way more. You're doing something that's 10 times bigger than what you realize. Yeah. And that's why we're doing this sort of hard yards up front, to make sure that we architect towards like solving this immediate problem, get people in. But then from there, to say the business model is now what else can we do with the audience data, whatever it is that we've got. There's a secondary value to this asset. And I mean, I hate saying an asset, because people think like, oh, I'm a number, I'm a barcode. Like, no, it's just, what can we do that can give something to somebody that has a value, that then on the other side, effectively, it's almost a two-sided market. Is there something else we can do to either increase the value or the margin to that direct consumer? Or is there a secondary market for some part of the application that we're doing, which quite often is integration opportunities, data mining, and learning that could ultimately feed a second thing. And we also see, like companies like Slack, which Slack didn't develop Slack. Slack was doing something else, and they used Slack that they developed in-house in order to solve a communication problem. Right. And it just so happened that took off, right. But So in your world, when somebody comes to you with an idea, what's that first call like? What's that first process when you're doing an assessment and looking where does 923 come in? And obviously there's the Andrew lens on it, because you're not just a development lead, you're literally thinking in the idea of like, I'm going to create a business with you.
That's right.
Through what we do as an agency, but you seem like a much more really high value, white glove, extra service versus just, an app farm, which is fantastic. Like, it solves a problem, but they won't think of it through the lens of what's the future of this application and what we're going to do with what's inside it.
Right. And that's exactly right. We built 150 products in our past, and each product has its unique business model. And so when they come to us, it's trying to match the business model to the idea, but there's 3 levels of how people come to us. The first one is they've never built a product, they've never built an app, they've never built an AI solution before, and it's their first time. Those are the first time, usually non-technical founders that have a great idea and some funding, and they're trying to bring it to market. Those are the hardest ones to succeed in, because even after we bring it to market, 90% of the next stage is basically sales and marketing. And if it's their first time doing it, they're going to hit all the roadblocks that almost everybody does when they do sales and marketing for the first time. And we do have a department that can help with that. But a founder truly has to go through almost 5 years of pain of figuring out what does product market fit look like. And that's hard. That's hard to tell them, sure, you can have your product and it's going to work perfectly, but you still have 90% of your work left from figuring out the product market fit. And I like to say there's 2 types of product market fit, right? There's the product market fit, as when a customer is addicted or comes into the funnel and downloads it for the first time. Are they getting serviced by the product the way that they intended to? MailChimp is a great example. Like, as soon as you use MailChimp, you're like, I get it. I get workflows. Yeah. I put one email in. I know the steps and how many emails need to be sent out to my clients. It's like a perfect product market fit because the product was built with that in mind. But the second product market fit, the hardest one and the one that most people talk about, is the sales and marketing. What industry, what niche, how is your product going to live inside of that niche? Who are the competitors? What's the right pricing? And then I imagine you can even break it down to like product market fit per pricing, product market fit per industry, right? And so there's this entire world that exists outside of the product being released. But the 2 other more common sales that we go through now, and we grew up, right? We'd done a lot of non-technical founders in our past. And we grew up to work with enterprise clients and also industries that have innovation labs. So Consumer Reports is one of our most recent client. We didn't work with Consumer Reports the whole. We worked with their innovation lab. And the same with Simply Safe as well. It allows us to still go from 0 to 1, to be scrappy, to be that engineering team that can be agile and adjust and figure out the product. But our value, it truly lies in the fact that we're a white glove service, and we can bring how the market with all of our other products that we're doing is telling us to build this current product for a company or a team that is looking for a revolutionary product that's going to change their business. And so by bringing that strategy and that style to it, and having the team that's been with us for the last 10 years now working on the same challenging problems together, it's almost like bringing a football team that has like such good gel, such good camaraderie, and such good ways to solve problems as a group, that we can bring that problem solving to our clients, introduce them to the idea, bring them in as like a partner in this problem solving crime show that we're putting together, and basically like bring everything together and say, hey, here's all of the issues we're dealing with. Here's typically how we solve problems. Here's the business models we can try to fit in. How do we bring that all together so that we can build a truly great product with great return on investment on the other end? And so that package is really what people seek us for. It's just our expertise and our ability to go fast, but build great scalable products that end up with millions of users on the other side.
When you also get the advantage with leveraging a 923 in that the entire playbook. Like you said, it's not just the team, but it's the team that's been successful across seasons.
Yes.
And in different weather conditions. So a very distinct thing of, beyond just the app development itself, like what is the life cycle of an app? And you've been in market for long enough to really see fundamental changes in the way that people consume application information. And, like we talk about the number of apps that are in a marketplace today, like, or in an app store, there's millions of applications that are just idle,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
so how do you get to the whatever percentage it is that actually makes it, successful? And also success is probably very different. Do you see a range of the type of applications? Is it more towards like the high growth? Do you see solopreneurs? I'm just curious what the profile of your customer looks like across the years.
Sure. And for those who are keeping track with my 3 types of customers, I forgot the third one or forgot to mention it. The third one is that seasoned entrepreneur that has already started and sold a company and then came back to us and is like, hey, I need an engineering team to go fast. But I already have the product in mind. I already have the product market fit because I have 1,000 people in my community. Those are great projects for us. But to answer your question about like, what is the seasonality of an app and how does it adjust over time? And like, where is you asking specifically, like, where does the app live in the market and like, how does it survive, right? Compared to the other markets.
Yeah.
I think what we see is the best way to explain it to somebody new is you only need 1,000 people. And those 1,000 people should be your biggest fans. It's kind of the Seth Godin model, right? If you can get 1,000 people in your tribe that are your biggest fans, you're going to be able to launch a product into that space and get traction and customer feedback and understand exactly what your 1,000 best friends or your tribe members are going to hear and use your app for. That will then allow you to launch to the next 1,000. And it's the same product market curve that we see all the time with the laggards and the early adopters, right? These early adopters, if you can get them addicted to the community and having a conversation in that community, launching a product in there gives you an advantage unlike any other, because you're getting feedback, you're getting instant results. And so I always suggest to anyone first launching an app to do that, to find the idea, to hack it together in a way that they can put it out into a community and work and try to attract people to kind of join the journey with them as they're building that first product. But from the enterprise side, they already have that community. Most enterprise clients that come to us, have millions and millions of customers, and they're trying to create another product for either another revenue stream or another business model. And so they can tap into that community and they can tap into those employees and bring resources and insights and different perspectives of how this product should be built. And it's our job to listen to all those, organize it all, put it in the good product strategy roadmap, and figure out exactly what the new customers or even the original customers that were part of that client's like entire user base, what are they really seeking? What are they going to provide? What can this product provide more value for them in the future that they're going to pay more money or stay on the platform longer? And so it's our job to bring in the resources and the people that have seen that cycle of clients over the last customers for the last 10 years and why they churned. What were the reasons that they liked the product originally? What other features have they been asking for? And so kind of like it's a shortcut if you're an enterprise because you have a large client base, you can tap into those communities and you can bring the product to market earlier because you have the ability to test earlier. And so I truly think the community is the shortcut for any product being launched today and using that community to your advantage of trying to figure out what's right for them and what will they pay for.
Was probably why I think I've seen more and more success with folks using Product Hunt and the like to be able to like quickly amplify. There's obviously a trade-off because there is and the other one is AppSumo. Yep. I'd say this because I've used these, myself and if I watched a recent podcast you likely saw was Peter Levels. He was on the Lex Fridman podcast and very interesting. And as a solopreneur has that same sort of idea. And what's interesting is the transparency with which he shares, this is selling this much, this is dead on the vine. Like he's been very open about where things have tipped over. But as a solopreneur, it's tough to get those lessons because he's obviously singularly focused on building more apps.
Yeah.
And so he will never be consultative. Great to listen to, fantastic human, neat story, but very unique in that this is a solopreneur story and thus doesn't map to the enterprise necessarily. Right. There may be parallels. So that's why I love, again, like what you're doing is not just learning, but learning, sharing, evolving, building the playbooks. And one thing that's interesting, applications like a mobile app for an existing customer base or an existing application or enterprise product or service. One thing I often find is the confusion that it should just be a repeat of what we're doing in another place. But I've often seen that that's actually one of the biggest problems, is that, like, don't just do what you did over here in a new form factor, because the interaction through that form factor could actually drive new behaviors. So I'm curious what you've seen in that, Andrew. How much is just kind of a new way to show other existing data versus fantastic new opportunities to interact with an application or a company?
Yeah. And on the Peter Levels thing, I think the thing that people forget about the solopreneur is if you look at his spreadsheet, every month he has tens, if not 20s, but every year he has hundreds at bats of ideas, of products that he put to market and failed. And so when you see his success and he talks about the success, it's fantastic. He's one of the best at like knowing when to double down, when to put money on and time into a product. And his Photos AI app and his architectural apps, they're fantastic. And they live in that moment in time that we talked about earlier, that, you know, AI was ripe. They were just hitting the market where people wanted to take pictures of themselves using AI. And he's phenomenal at just like knowing the trend, matching it with an idea, but he also has like 99 other ideas at that same time that are not taking off. Right. So that's really important to understand as a solopreneur, is you can't just look at Peter and say, great success, great product, and great solopreneur, which he is. You have to also put in the time to the 99 other apps, which we learned as a venture studio. We had 14 startups. Only 3 of them have potential of being acquired. And I was told by some of the best venture studios that you're going to have to get to 27, 28, 29 to have one of them pay back for the other 27. And that's a big number. That's a lot of investment, a lot of time into CEOs, a lot of time into product building, business model matching. It's a whole gamut that you have to run through to get that to work correctly. And so coming to your questions about like when a mobile app succeeds, like what are they truly doing right? And what is the interactions, and how do you keep people onto a platform? I think we're seeing right now the downfall of iOS 18 and how detrimental it is to change habits. iOS is very particular in how the app screen's set up, and how when you press the button on like do not disturb, it's very similar to the last 16 versions or 15 versions or whatever it is. Yeah. So you run this parallel problem of how do you innovate and create a new home screen with a new experience, with new button interactions, while also changing habits. And people might be so used to those habits and that consistency that they don't want you to change. It's kind of the bank business model. If the bank can have the exact same login with the exact same user interface for 10 years, they'll keep more customers because it'll feel secure. They've never been hacked before. They never had a problem with their bank. And so as long as they can keep logging in and seeing the money the same way they've seen in the past, they're not going to get to that struggle moment that Christian Claytonson talks about, of when to turn, when to start looking for that alternative. And I think iOS 18 is falling into this trap of trying to adapt to a Google phone, the AI phone, while also keeping their roots. And you see that struggle because as they change a UI, the Apple army comes up and shouts at Apple and says, this is wrong, this is weird, this doesn't feel right. And they are stuck in the past because their user interface is for a world without AI. So how do they keep the customers that are used to the habits they've created by using their platform and their phones, while also enhancing a new world of AI into the products themselves, while creating this like non-touch interaction? So if you don't want to disturb, if you want to switch the toggle on your phone from, do not disturb to disturb me at all times, Apple's probably pushing you to use voice, or to use this concept of like, hey, turn this off quickly. We don't want you to press the buttons. And that's just a short example of one that I've seen where they changed the UI. It became very awkward to use, even though in their product testing, when they put it between 2 customers, the customers are like, yeah, that's easier to use. It's better in this new innovative idea that you've created, but habitually it feels bad. It feels awkward. It feels new. And I'm not used to new on an Apple phone. I'm used for my app to being in the top left corner every time I want to open Spotify. My top right corner is to open my bank. And if you change that on me, my habits are changing, and I have to either like those changes and stay with the platform, or churn off and look for something new. And I think a lot of products that we release are in that mode of, how do I create a product? How do I keep the clients? And how do I then do what we call skeuomorphism, of the idea of keeping somebody in the style of what they're used to in the real world, while using a technology product and then executing the same process over and over again so that they feel rewarded at the end without feeling like it was an obstruction. So it's quite the challenge. And I think even the big products like Apple and Spotify does fantastic at this, by the way. So if you want to see a use case of like a company that truly understands how to introduce a new feature into a product, Spotify is one of the best. But Apple is interestingly enough getting a lot of conversations about iOS 18 being different than everything in the past, and rightfully so. So that's the challenge that any new product developer or founder is going to face when they release their first product.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned skeuomorphism. I was about to mention, I was in my head of like, remember when skeuomorphic icons, I forget who the designer was, who was with Apple at the time, and it was like, they were all in on like that realistic, the wood paneling, yes. Like it had to look tactile, it looked physical. And then they switched, and then Johnny Ive sort of took over and said, okay, we're going back to simple and flat. Yes. And then flat became the new thing. And it's so funny how these trends go. But then it's one of the reasons why I get frightened of going down the road with app development for mobile is often just like, how do I as a, like, I'm a hack programmer at best. So I'm going to design for web primarily because I don't want to, if I develop for iOS, I've got to figure out, how to move it into Swift. I've got to do something. And then I've got 10 devices to test. But then I move over to Android and like the testing list is all of a sudden like 5 pages of drop downs. And you're like,
all those phones exactly. to test with too. You got to test with every phone.
And now folding ones, like it's wild.
It was even worse back in the day, like in 2012, 2014, when we were releasing our first product. HTC had their own operating system. Motorola had their own operating system. So we get a call, like it was just the two of us at the time, but we get a call that somebody who's like, I got a Motorola X472. And we're like, great. I don't have that phone. What bug are you experiencing? And we were camera based, right? So there was a lot of camera tricks we had to pull to get the QR codes to work. And so we'd have to go buy that phone and test with it. And I remember there was pictures at that time of like these QA test farms, and it was just phones on a shelf, and you would ask them to test for a certain amount of money, and they would just go phone to phone to phone to phone. And so I think we're privileged now because iOS and Android, like if you look at the Spotify app across iOS and Android, it's identical. The buttons, the features, even the back buttons are almost identical at this point. So we've come to this realization of like what a phone truly is when you're interacting with it. And Spotify just does one of the best at like making the layers work as you slide something above a screen or below a screen. And they do that for both Android and iPhone. So we're finally into this like one design deployed on 2 phones. And it's been, 12 years of messing with, does the back button work on Android or does it work on iPhone the same way? And still to this day, it's a little quirky, but we're close to like one unified design.
Well, and what was the Apache project that was meant for like all mobile? Goodness gracious.
Like the hybrid things you're talking about?
Yeah, it was basically designed for this, and it would port to every mobile OS. I'm trying to remember what the name of the project was.
They had Cordova for a while, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing, but that was before native apps were really... native apps were just coming in. It was Objective-C, and it was fresh. And then, I liked the idea of, can we make a not using native app, but almost native app and much more cross-compatibility. But then the individualism and the feature set you can unlock with native, all of a sudden it's like, especially for the iOS features, and you want to get in now with the privacy modes and all of the other intricacies and idiosyncrasies of the physical device and the application and the OS, you can't go generic. You literally would have to be, I need someone who's writing Swift. I need someone that's going to be able to write for Android and our web. Like, welcome to 19 JavaScript frameworks. Good luck and let me know how it goes.
I think that was the trend from 2020 to like 2022. And kind of the mobile apps heyday was 2016 to 2020, right? That was when everyone just wanted a native mobile app for their website, for the product, and it just needed to be converted. And hybrid versus native was always an option. I think nowadays we're back into very much hybrid apps. There's React Native, there's Flutter, those two are really taking off again. And you can see both from the developer communities, there's a lot more people in those communities than there has been in the past. So I think we're back to hybrid for two reasons. Phones are getting more standardized. A Bluetooth radio is a Bluetooth radio. A phone,
Right.
a camera is a camera. And so we're getting more standardized across the unification of Android and iPhone. But I also think people are conscious about, I just want one developer that can solve all of my problems. And I don't want to hire a Swift person after you finish my app. I don't want to hire a Kotlin person that can just do Android and not have other skills inside of the company. So the two, merging wedges that are really happening in all organizations is AI is pushing people to have less employees per revenue. And I think the products that we're building need to fit in the narrow band that those less employees can manage and maintain those applications, whether it's on the web or mobile. And so as AI kind of pushes that lower and lower and gets those employees to a lower number per revenue, you're going to have more people doing more skills. And with the ability to look up any piece of software question you could have on the internet and get that answer through a large language model, you're truly going to get these really educated, really well performing developers that can support 2 or 3 platforms, especially if they're writing it in the same code base. So I think that wedge is causing this back to a hybrid world.
Well, let's talk about that new opportunity, which is very different now because of the client-side compute capability. And we've been talking in the industry about edge computing for years, and it was so sort of misallocated as to what it really meant. And it was this idea. And whenever someone said like edge, they thought of like literally, take a Raspberry Pi and I'm going to stick it on a telephone tower. And it's like, that's not like, this is literally my microphone flag is a Raspberry Pi with a TFTP screen, on a 3D printed mic flag.
Yeah.
This is wild. This is stuff I could never have done 5 years ago because it's just at a consumer level, I can do something that was this would have cost me $1,000 to do in any other way. And it cost me at this point, about $67. Yeah. And it's a fun project, but looking at what we can do with now access to the AI inference in devices and to be able to do much more storing and processing locally, but then feedback and the low cost now of doing, pub sub and serverless. So we no longer have to have these monstrous client server model applications that are being extended into just a mobile UI. You can literally have a mobile app that is fundamentally different and doing something that you can't do anywhere else because of access to the device and the proximity to where the activity is occurring.
Yeah. I think where the world is going, I've been speaking about this a lot on stage during this conference season, is that we will have a phone that has a search bar. That search bar will be managed by the assistant. So whether it's Gemini or Siri or Alexa, pick your choice. And whoever's listening just had a bunch of devices ringing in their phone as I listed out all three.
Hey, Google.
We're supposed to use the A word, the G word, and the S word, right? So we don't launch.
There was a radio show I used to listen to, and they used to always, in the middle of the show, they just go, Xbox, turn off, just to mess with people.
Yeah. I am shocked there hasn't been a Super Bowl commercial yet where they're like, hey, Alexa, buy Coca-Cola. You're like, wow,
exactly.
Brilliant, right? Like that should happen. But yeah, I think this world, what we're looking at with companies asking us these questions to build all these different products is, how is it going to work when you don't have a UI? And I said specifically, Uber is a great candidate of I don't need to ever log into Uber to order a taxi to where I'm standing. I just need to shout into my assistant, order a taxi service. I'm trying to get to the airport. And I don't necessarily care if Uber comes, Lyft comes, or I always use the joke as like Rich's fluffy car service, right? Like it doesn't actually matter what pulls up. If it's a brand that's reputable and I trust it and I'm willing to get into that cab once it gets to the point that I'm here, I just want to get to the airport. But that also points out that I don't need to log into Uber to do that task. And as these AI platforms work on the mobile phone and they start working in the large language model and they start learning about me, they're going to start realizing that I care for Uber a little bit better than Lyft because I give it 5 stars instead of 3 stars on Lyft. And therefore, there might be a little bit of an edge on my device when I ask for a taxi service. And the state that have been fighting Uber can bring back, why don't we throw into the mix, into the large language model, a yellow cab? And my point is, if I'm not using the interface and I'm not actually logging into Uber and ordering it from Uber itself, and I'm trying to do it from the device, it does change how mobile apps are built. It changes how they're structured. It changes the architecture, and it changes the information that is really needed, which is the middle of the funnel to the very bottom of the funnel, me getting the product, and no longer the search aspect. That search can be handled by the AI component or the AI large language model, whether it lives on the phone or the cloud, but I can do it through the assistant. And I think that's really important to understand as we transition into AI, is that it's not about the top of the funnel search, the results, me navigating through all the different options and the 44,000 different results I can get. I truly just want the thing to show up on my doorstep or me to step into that trusted taxi cab and take me to the airport. So I think that's the switch of UI.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting that Google created something that allowed us to, like, the simplest thing, a blank screen with a search bar.
That's right.
And 2 buttons on it.
That's right.
And it would technically was really 1 button because no one presses the I'm
feeling lucky.
I'm feeling lucky more than once. So like that's cute, but I'm never gonna use that again. Yeah. But I as a practitioner, like, but I always think, is this a nerd thing versus a traditional consumer that's not tech focused? So I love that idea of, like, when I open my phone, I don't care where my icon is. I pull down and I type in the first letters of the app. And I learn that I've got 3 things that are YouTube. I've got YouTube and YouTube Studio. So I type YT, and the first one that comes up by preference, because I open YouTube more than YouTube Studio, comes up.
Right.
So I don't care where it is in my phone. I used to even do that with the Windows UI. Like, I don't need the start bar. I need the search bar. And so I just type in cmd.exe, start run, and I don't need to look for it. I just learned the command and I would type it in and go. I learned the shortcut commands so it was faster for me. But that's a very nerd oriented thing, right? Like, that's the context in which I think, because I'm very familiar with the app. So I think from that way, versus a lot of consumers more like they're action oriented or outcome oriented. So I'm curious from your experience, like, how are these new interfaces and removing the swipe between screens to look for your app? Like, is it positive or negative? And what's the audience that you have to account for because of, their consumer market may be not used to, doing search and just typing in what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think history repeats itself or rhymes very consistently. And you remember, before Google introduced that search bar, why did they need to include a simple screen with a search bar? Because every single product at that time was trying to create an interface of a search bar on their website. And they were very unified. You'd have to go to pets.com to search pets. You'd have to go to Yahoo Finance to search the financial stocks. There was never a concept of somebody bringing it all together with one search bar so that you can start at a destination even higher and have optionality once you click enter on that original search bar. So that was the innovation, but it happens like this in so many products, right? Microsoft Office 365 used to be a CD that you purchased, and you would gain access to Windows and Microsoft products for the entire year until they upgraded to, 2000, what was the last one they did? 2012, 2014, somewhere around there. And every year you'd get a new CD and you keep installing it. And then Google kind of pushed them to say, this is a SaaS model. I actually don't need Word and Excel and Microsoft Project on a CD. I just need Excel. And I'll purchase Microsoft Windows just to get Excel, but in reality, I'm overpaying because I don't really want the other products. And so Google realized this and says, you can have any product for free. That's not what we're here for. We just want you on our platform versus Microsoft. And so what did Microsoft do? They decoupled Excel. They decoupled Word. They put it individually able to be purchased. Adobe did the same thing at the time, right? They took all of their one package things and they put it back down to these, hey, you can just purchase Photoshop. You can just purchase their Illustrator. And then we all came back together again, right? Through the sine wave and the seasonality, we realized, well, if you're going to buy Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, why don't we have a package that includes them all? And so now you can have a SaaS model for Adobe or Microsoft that encompasses all of the products under one house. You can do that for Google. And I think we're in this larger cycle for searching on the internet. Before Google existed with that original search bar, you would have to go to a specific website, remember that website, and find the product that you were looking for. Google made it easier for you to get that optionality. And then we created all these apps with all these domains and all these servers with all my information located all across the world in these servers that only I know about. Well, finally, somebody's starting to say, what if we bring this all back together again? What if we bring it to the AI assistant And the AI learns about the individual, learns about their tendencies, and says, hey, do you want to buy a toaster today? Here's the toaster that would be perfect for your house. And it doesn't matter if it comes from eBay or Amazon or Pottery Barn or whatever product store is offering that toaster. I truly just want to buy a toaster, right? And so I think we're coming back together in this famous sine wave of just seasonality of a products being decoupled and put back together. And we decoupled apps to 100. I have 350 apps on my phone, and now somebody's finally bringing it back together and allowing me to have that one search with that run and not even need to go into the app, but actually bring the information that's in that app to me. And I think that's the change.
What's interesting, I'll say that a thing that's probably apropos to your history, I think Goldratt, Eli Goldratt was famous for saying, I think he's the one that coined the idea of show me how you measure me and I'll show you how I'll behave. And it's a very interesting thing. And then it created this, when search became the primary interface, SEO became the most important thing. But now with AI on top of search, it's really twisting things up, because now you're getting Gemini's suggested result, which obscures the top results. So it's no longer about getting the first one on the page or getting that first sponsored spot, but you now have to become important to the LLM to then appear, and then they get attribution, but it's it's one click further. It's always a little harder to get there. So there's an interesting thing about, there's a restaurant in London. It's called Best Thai Food Near Me.
Yeah.
Like,
brilliant.
They realized that, like, I'm going to nail this SEO thing literally.
Yeah. It's the same reason you see like a plumbing store. It's like ABC Plumbing, because Google used to list alphabetically when you search for plumbing.
I think I used to always joke is that I'm going to start up, it was a thing of the old phone books, because that was from literally the phone books. It was like the AAA Aardvark Hotel, because it was like 5 A's. It would always be at the top. And that was what we would do. So you'd have all these like 5A taxi.
Yeah, there you go. But with the large
large
language model, you're exactly right. That search, the famous one I show is noise canceling headphones. If you search Google today for noise canceling headphones, it's been enabled for all users that the AI overview will be the result. In that AI overview, it'll list out every single thing that CNET has specifically done expert reviews on for those noise canceling headphones in the AI overview. More importantly, it not only does it list it, it strips the affiliate links that CNET has and replaces them with a direct link to Sonos, a direct link to Bose, a direct link to Sony, and says, click here to buy the headphone that we're suggesting to you, even though at the bottom it's probably stolen directly from CNET. So the only ones that are going to survive this are the Consumer Reports of the world that have all their data private with true expert reviews and an expert database and an expert way to recall that information that I can trust. Because the CNETs of the world and the Best Buys, the companies that put their expert reviews online for free have just been gobbled up. And that top of the funnel has been completely eaten up by AI. And that AI overview is now just telling me, go purchase this headphone because you want this one, not because of some research I've done on CNET.
It's a wild time. And there's a new thing that I know the idea of Wikipedia stuffing was an interesting thing because somebody figured out by doing traffic monitoring, I forget who the engineer was, and they published this thing of, we could see a vast amount of traffic that was happening in and out of Wikipedia one day every month or whatever. And I realized it was all coming from OpenAI, because that's when it was basically doing a brutal, sort of brute force scan of Wikipedia.
Extraction.
So people then started to go in, and the day before, like a few hours before it would begin, they would change a bunch of Wikipedia articles. It gets captured. Wikipedia does what it does, and the community undoes the changes, and they auto revert, but too late. It's already in the LLM. And once it's in vectorized format, good luck pulling that out.
and then once the foundation model is trained on it, and there's always that political layer that ChatGPT, that OpenAI stuffs into it as well, so it makes sure that it's guided and protected.
Right.
But it also can be opinionated too. So if there's stuff in Wikipedia that is factual, and it gets changed right before that OpenAI crawls it, I hope there's some sort of layer on top of that that's fact checking against something besides Wikipedia to make sure that it's accurate before it gets put in a prompt or a response to a prompt of a human trying to get information for something important.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing now. We have to look at the totality of sources, not just the singular, amount of backlinks that's going to get us to that top of the list anymore. So it's a very interesting thing. I take us way off of 923 just because like this is such a fantastic thing. It's a great thing to nerd out on. But let's talk about from the business side then. What's the reason that somebody needs to look at a mobile experience as a way to reach their consumer? Like in 2024 and 2025, what does mobile look like as an entry point for a customer experience?
Yeah, we're not as concerned about mobile as we're concerned about AI, right? Because as an AI agency, we're truly trying to be ahead of the curve of where enterprises want to interact with their clients and retain the revenue or grow into new product markets. So our focus is what is the wave that's coming down the pipeline that AI is pushing us into? And it's those two things, which is revenue per employee, but it's also being able to figure out how can I create a product from scratch or in this AI world that is going to provide faster, more efficient, and more accurate answers than I'm currently getting. And so every company that we work with, we start with a knowledge base. And I think that is the most important thing because I say all the time, data is the new oil. If you had this resource, whether you're Experian or Consumer Reports, they're great examples of 90 years of expert reviews of products that have existed across the American consumer space. And Experian has credit history data from all the humans that have ever swiped a credit card on e-commerce or anywhere in the world. And so they have these incredible moats. And so if you're thinking about building any product, whether it's mobile or web, you really want to think of where can I provide the most resources for my clients? And it's the data you have and the data that you've held onto and analyzing that data and figuring out trends and understanding how that data is utilized when someone purchases a product so that you can predict other people to purchase that same product. And so I think the focus is understand what you have as a CEO, understand what type of products exist in your landscape, and then how can your team utilize that same data source to make their jobs more efficient and more understanding of getting faster answers with more accurate decisions and enhancing the ability for your company to move forward in this new world without kind of building like an old case CRM or building like an old MRP system. Right? You truly should be focused on this new wave of building a product that is conversational, that is accurate, that is based on factual data of your company, and training it to give you more accurate information over time so that each department's top employees, their entire knowledge base of their head of what they've learned for the last X number of years in that company is built into the procedures and the FAQs of this model so that anyone else that joins the company is starting off as an expert. Right. And they have this AI tool that's based on their data, that's based on their procedures, that's based on their culture, and explains to them the proper answer whenever they go searching for it. So I think that's the important thing to take away.
Yeah, and I think on the monitor, so I've spent a lot of time in like monitoring and what is now we know of as observability. And it was funny that the differentiation is very intense of going from like monitoring, which is like polling or pushing or pulling, whatever it's going to be, versus observability, which the goal of observability is not just a new way to monitor. It is the ability to ask a question of a system based on its state and have that answer be effectively an aggregation or some kind of, a way that's a step above. How do we provide the right abstraction? And then even better is, can you do it in natural language?
That's right.
And that becomes like the huge differentiator. But there's so many things and so many decisions and questions, and it can be done wrong in so many ways. So I guess you said data's the new oil, but also the problem is if I want to go to my oil and I want to get a particular thing and refine one particular thing out of it, I may have something else that I see as waste in the refining process. And then 5 years from now, that thing that we used to say was waste actually has a surprising amount of signal in it.
That's right.
So what are the things that your clients are probably accidentally finding out about the value of the data that they have in-house?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's because it's not accidental, it's intentional because of the extraction process, but it becomes accidental to the employee, right? The employee doesn't realize the amount of repetitive tasks they do. And I think that's an important understanding is we're unaware of what chain of thought reasoning can do on a workforce. And it's not about, hey, I'm just having a conversation with this thing and it's giving me the answer. Because most people are used to ChatGPT at this point. They understand how it works, but it's the chain of thought. It's the reasoning aspect that is truly affecting how a CEO is thinking about AI once they come to discover how it can work. I think the surprise becomes that the employee looks at it and was like, oh, that can do what I did. And so a perfect use case is a paralegal. We have one client that is in the prison space, and their job is when somebody gets sentenced to prison to produce this report called the PSR, which sometimes takes 20 to 30 hours to produce of, types of research you do on that individual, types of other court cases that have existed around the crime that person has done. And with the eminent, like how large language models think and can reason, we now can give it a bunch of sample cases of other people in other scenarios that have gone through that same condition and compare it and contrast it and say, this is what this judge or this type of court case typically has for a result. So therefore, we can train the model on the reasoning aspect of what humans went through. If person did this, these are the options that I have. All right, let's pick option 2. If option 2 is selected, these are the next 3 options we can pick because option 2 is already selected. And that chain of thought of creating a rule-based system allows a consultant or an employee to go through that with the machine and realize that the machine can be trained on this. So a company should take its processes and procedures, and once a CEO realizes that we're training on the steps that a person takes to key information in from one computer to another computer, or the steps that a purchaser is making when they're going to buy a product, what information do they need to make sure that that product has a lead time of 13 days or 12 days or even 2 days? Like, when do they need to expedite? All of those are decision trees. And if you train the AI on the process, you now can make that decision tree alongside the human. And I think that's that advent. Once you introduce that idea to the CEO, now we're starting to talk about entire changes of companies. You're not just looking at having a conversation with your data. You're looking at changing how your workforce thinks and operates because the procedures have been embedded into the process. And now this process can truly have an effect on how much time you're spending per task or per product or per sale that you're working on, and reducing that so that that person can create more sales, create more opportunities, sell more products, right? And now you're increasing revenue per employee, which is what I keep pointing out.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we often think of the risk of AI, which is, I won't dive into it here because I'm sure you've been asked about it 1,000 times. So every AI conference or every tech conference is like the ethics of AI and will AI take my job are the 2 topics that always come up, produce the same identical talk track, which is, I agree that it's a good conversation, but it needs to be more than an hour because we always get to the same endpoint, which is, that's interesting. No prescriptive, plan to do something about it. We just have the same discussion. It's like watching the news, on a 5-minute segment on what's going on in the world. You're like, you're not going to learn in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What's meaningful about affecting the outcome. And when I look at, what we can do, work with a lot of people in financial that did like OCR stuff. So they paper files. There was all this work about getting OCR, all the existing content, and make it part of the process. So then you can do other things with it for feeding other electronic systems. And through the course of doing that, we highlight and find inefficiencies. Hey, it's the theory of constraints, rolling into production. And the people that were using it initially were like, oh, what happens if they don't need me anymore? I'm just feeding the paper into the thing. And you're like, no. The purpose is that we're trying to optimize what you're doing so that the thing that you do that's very human can now be 80% of your day instead of 20% of your day. Right. And we can do not more in less time, but we can do more without burning your employees out. Like, we can achieve more, but then now we can optimize for employee balance and hours. And like you said, it's price per employee, revenue per employee. There are things that we have to do, basic business KPIs. Right. It's not about getting rid of the person. The person that should be worried is the manager of those 5 people who, like, you used to be the coordinator. Guess what? Like, that's less important
now. Everyone's performing. Yeah. I think an easy use case that we've had is we helped an insurance company fill sales. Like in a day, they had a number of sales calls that they were supposed to do, and they were sectioned off every half hour. Well, as we know, if you have a team of people that are taking sales calls, There will be cancellations. There'll be people that were on the wrong call. There'll be people that didn't realize what they were calling about. And so if a salesperson today, let's say 70% of it was filled with nonsense calls. Well, that person's still sitting at their desk working for the company for 8 hours a day, half hour. That's 16 possible calls that person could be taking, right? And you're paying for those 16 calls and you're setting them up, hoping that they're legitimate calls. We have now taken that from a very low number to a very high number, where we're filling 80 to 90% of those slots with accurate, poignant, and very timely sales calls. So now they're increasing revenue without changing their employee makeup at all. Those employees are fully employed like they were before. We're not replacing any employee. So it's really important to focus on the revenue per employee and not replacing a workforce. Because once you give them the opportunity to work in that 8-hour time span of what they were supposed to be doing with efficient tasks that are timely and actually poignant for the company, now you're creating revenue from nowhere. And that's why I keep saying it's really important that we do chain of thought reasoning. It's really important that we understand the procedures and the baseline of why people are doing a task. And if you can mimic that and imitate that, you now have all top performing employees. You take the best person in each department and you say, here's the procedures, here's the process. If you have any questions, ask this conversational bot, but we're going to get you to be a top performer much sooner than we ever have in the past. And I think that's why I love working with some of these clients.
And the reason why I would encourage anyone, obviously you and the team are fantastic in the way that you approach the problem itself and your understanding of outcome driven development, really, really seeing the value in what we're doing. Yeah. It's because if I'm going to take on an AI project, I have to think, what's the best foundation model to work from? How do I manage my own proprietary? There's the amount of decisions that are technical and business decisions that are very difficult, that require a lot of knowledge and experience. How do you hire a top talent team to be able to build this versus engage somebody who is, has the agency skills you've got, has the pedigree in successfully, executing, so that then they can focus on what is the business logic I need to put in here, and then safely manage the development process. Because find me a team working on their own AI project, and I'll find you people that are about to bleed proprietary data into a foundation model that they will never know how to get back out.
That's right. The first industry we're seeing this disruption in is the legal industry. I've been in Harvard Business use cases in the last few weeks about one of the largest legal firms using AI, using Harvey AI as their tool to try to decrease the costs of research, decrease the cost of paralegal. And it's astronomical. It's in the 50s of millions of dollars that they're saving. And that's not abnormal now with the introduction of AI, of seeing that big of a disruption. And I think the point is that with paralegals and with lawyers themselves, what's going to change is the hourly rate, because the hourly rate has gotten so high that legal has said, we can provide more value, we can provide more effect for your business because you're giving us this contract to review, and we're going to make sure that you're safe and secure. If you can still make that promise while decreasing the hourly rate, well, the market is going to contrast to the best in the space. Who's providing that most value as the hourly rate comes down? And I think we're almost seeing that in real time here as Harvey starts using more, getting more clients, more firms into their system. And we're even building custom solutions from some legal firms as well. And it's like this convergence of how do you figure out how to get the hourly rate competitive while also realizing that there's an entire market that still needs lawyers. That's not going away. Right. The request to get a lawyer to review a contract is still needed. And I still need a human to give me the trust and the strength to put forward to my customer that this legal document is something I'm going to stand behind. And I can only do that with another human. But if I can bring the cost down to do that, I'd be very happy as a client of a lawyer. And I think we're seeing that happen very quickly as these AI bots and large language models start working with the law firms.
I tell you, the one thing I wish they had NLP for is bloody legal language. It still drives me nuts. Yes. I need to hire a guy at $500 an hour to write herefore, under, and wherefore, before, all these crazy words. What is this? It's old English.
Yeah. And if you get a good one and they go back and forth with another good lawyer, it's like poetry. And they protect you, and you're being protected while the other client's being protected. And by the end of the contract, you both sign, and you're like, I'm completely happy with these results. And so it's a very good skill that we should always pay for. I just wonder if the prices have gotten too high, and now AI is finally the solution to bring those prices back down.
You just you pulled something out of there. The reason why we love what we do, why lawyers, they do a thing that we do not understand, but we trust the outcome. That's and right. We attach a value to that outcome. And AI effectively is the same thing. It's a very black box sort of thing that we don't understand necessarily how it does what it does, but we, through the course of using it, will begin to more greatly trust the outcome, and thus we can attach a material benefit and a value to it. And right. AI is a tool which still needs, they said, very, very human interaction with it. It's the same thing, like look at all the theory of constraints and Goldrat's early work with supply chain management. It wasn't about getting rid of the people on the floor. It was about making sure that they're generating the most revenue per employee for the company so that we could actually hire more and scale better. And you knew when to scale and where to scale.
Yeah. You brought that book up a few times. It is my number one book recommendation, the one I've passed off to most people that are in tech, because they don't realize that the theory of constraints is all they do as a CEO. It's relieving those bottlenecks. And now with AI, like you can just look down the chain of problems that your business has and say, great, it's awesome that you can make 13 widgets an hour, but the thing that houses the widget is only at 2 an hour. So it doesn't matter that you can make 13. It doesn't matter that like AI has helped us, our customer service, do so well. We can only sell 1,000 products a day because that's what our constraint is. And so a CEO has to understand those theory of constraints. But I think as you go into kind of the next wave of selling this, we do have to be very cautious that AI also has a very problematic problem, and it's like the enhancement of what social media is today to teenagers. If humans, like right now with teenagers, right, they look at social media and they see all their friends smiling on destinations all the time, always traveling, always happy. They don't realize that there's a person behind that could be sad or depressed, and then they feel sad or depressed because they're not like the smiling person. And what's happening is the realization that there is somebody out there that's better than them, and they don't know how to get to that level of happiness because they haven't been taught it properly, or they're just, on social media too much, and not everybody's that happy in the real world anyways. And they should just realize that like everyone's like them anyways, and they're fine and they're good people and they should keep being a good person. What AI brings to us is this ability of a machine that can be better at us than a lot of things. And if you look at that way, every time you put a picture online, we're going to have a button that says, make me look like a supermodel. And that might be what you present to people instead of your real self. And so we do have to be careful that like AI itself is good in a workforce. It's good to help people perform better. But once it starts being better at us than our job, better at us than how we look, better at us than all these tools and things that we've used, we have to be very careful of what it does to the psyche of the humans using them. And that's where the addiction happens, because you and I probably don't use Facebook nowadays. We've grown past that. We like don't even log in anymore. It's like not a place that I want to spend my time. I'm not addicted to it. I'm not using it. But AI is going to be this thing that's going to be so easy to use, so easy to get an answer. It's going to be an addiction. And I am worried once it becomes on the device and everyone's aware, I don't need to search Google anymore. I just need to shout into this search bar what I'm asking, and it will give me an answer. They're going to be lazy enough to take that answer as fact. And as we keep shouting into this thing and keep getting the answers back, it's going to be so convenient that it's going to be an addiction. And so I am worried about what that means for how we all use AI in the future.
Yeah, in the same way that we used to like pay people in, other parts of the world to generate traffic, we're going to be paying them to create knowledge.
That's right. And knowledge and a support system of what we believe in. Right? It's the echo chambers that happen on Facebook. It's the echo chambers that happen in the political space. But I have a belief and I have values and I have family that I believe in. And so I need to have a closeness to what my values are, while also still being able to learn and adapt to the world and see other people's views and other people's points of view. Because I think that's important. And how do you teach an AI to have both of those? It's a big challenge that OpenAI and Gemini are facing right now. Because if you type in like founding fathers of the United States, sure enough, there's a non-white person in that picture. Right. Well, what happened here? Like, how is like the founding fathers? It's very factual who it is, but there's been a layer added in. It's like we can't just type in doctors and have the same white person show up as every picture. So let's add in a layer of mixing this up. But then it goes to the founding fathers and you're like, wait a second, pull back, pull back, pull back. We can't do it on factual stuff. So they're playing with it in real time, and we have to figure out how it's accurate, factual, and something that people actually know is truth.
Yeah, that's interesting to think of, like how at some point we need to be able to mark an artifact as immutable, like a fact. And this is the problem, is not even to say this is a fact. And people say, oh, this is a fact, it's hard to dispute. I'm like, well, your fact has a surprising amount of opinion based in it. It's like it's fact-ish.
That's right.
And that becomes, whose facts are better. And facts are also ephemeral in a way because they have a point in time, because they have a set of surroundings that allow it to be a fact. Like it's a factual representation. It's an empirical thing, but empirical doesn't mean right. Empirical means it has the right context at the moment. It's like even when people say it's by consensus. Consensus isn't the right answer. It's enough people agreeing that it is the right answer they will agree on.
Yeah. The one I use that doesn't get me in trouble, and it's a perfect use case that we all believe in, well, there's probably a small subset, is Pluto. At a certain time, Pluto was a planet. And there are scientific journals, Harvard business cases. There is hundreds and hundreds, well, maybe not hundreds of years, but at least 90 years of data of the internet and books telling us that Pluto is a planet. And it also is telling us that Pluto is a very rocky planet. And then in 2004, I think it was, or 1996, I can't remember which year it was.
Pluto got demoted,
It got demoted as a non-planet. And so now there's all this Wikipedia information and consensus around how Pluto's not a planet and it's very gaseous. Now, what's really funny, if you ask ChatGPT, is this a planet? It'll say, no, it's not a planet. But if you ask it, is it gaseous or rocky? No one's gone that deep into Pluto to like trick it, to force it to say it's not a planet anymore. They forgot to go to the next level, and it like starts confusing it. And it's like, well, it's a gaseous planet that's really hard. You're like, well, how's that possible? It's like either a hard planet or it's gaseous, right? And so we've trained these models, or we've tried to train these models on facts, Pluto being not a planet. So some human has injected that every time this question gets asked, answer that it's not a planet, because it has changed over time. So don't confuse the model, but that also means we have to tell it what substance it's made of. When you talk about 8 other planets or 9 other planets, which one is right? At which time of year? Like what year did you make that search? And so there's all these facts that go into that are truly facts up until that year that Pluto didn't become a planet. And now there's facts after the fact, right? So it's very hard, but it's a topic that I always use because it's not political. It is something that we all agree on. And it's like, you still have a problem here.
And also the age that I used, the mnemonic that I used for it was, for Mars, Venus, Earth, whatever. My very eager mother just showed us 9 planets.
Right.
And that's how I remembered it. But now it'd be like, oh no.
There's a Dave Matthews typical situation. It's, it says 9 planets in the second verse. And so you sing that and you're like, wait, it should switch to 8 now. I wonder if the large language model can change that song with his voice in there, right?
Well, I hate that we're at the end of time, because there's so many things I'd love to talk about. One thing, I do want to. There's a neat thing that I'll encourage people to take a look at that was interesting, and you probably have looked at it. Was the recent publishing by Apple? It was actually last week, talking about the lack of their proof in that simple mathematical reasoning doesn't work in LLMs, and they provided a good test framework, which was very interesting. So it's a neat thing to explore for people. In that there's still a lot of limitations, and that's, again, I'll say this, the reason why I bring it up: do you want to become an expert in AI, or do you want to find people who are experts in AI? Right. So I'll say it so you don't have to talk to 923 Studio. Like that's it. Phone people that have done this successfully repeatedly and have seen both successes and failures in implementations, so that you can tap into the same way we look to the LLM, is because it knows more than I do. So I'm going to trust it more.
That's right.
But one quick thing, we talked at the very start about a few different apps that you've had that are successful. And especially through the world of COVID, we had a lot of changes in life behaviors. So if you just take a couple minutes and let's talk about Altar. Sure. How did Altar come about, and what has made it successful?
Sure. So Altar was definitely a COVID product. We had the opportunity to work with Zoom at the time. They were trying to figure out how to get more people using their conference software and all of the different tools that had come out. And Zoom, if you remember, was on a rocket ship with their stock. And so we looked at the list of people that were building products for it and the products they were building. And I live in New England. So I'm driving around New England at the time, staying in my car, not talking to people. and just noticing all the churches that had closed until further notice. I don't know how to do a service, or, just the signs they have in front of churches and synagogues and all these different places where people worship, saying, we don't know what to do. And it was a shame to look at the Zoom list and not see a match between all of the people seeking help online, whether it's a yoga therapy, a pet therapy, or, human therapy, mental therapy. There's all these services, but there was not a service for church. And so we thought it was an opportunity, and we were so lucky to find Stephanie Leith at the time, Stephanie Antonucci Leith, who was our CEO for that product. She really brought it from an idea all the way to what it is today. So we have thousands of churches that have gone through the Altar platform, and it's a service that you attach to your church, and on Sunday or whatever day you worship, you log in and you have a video camera in front of you, and the audience can sit in a pew and they can talk to the people next to them that are also on camera. But when you talk to them, the pastor's voice comes down and the people next to them can be heard. And so you can pass the peace. You can do those things in church that feel normal when you're in person. Wow, we're trying to recreate that experience online. And still to this day, it's the only platform that has that capability, whether it's for online learning. I still think it's a great tool for online learning, but it has the ability for you to have a conversation with the people in the audience while still watching a video together, whether that be a service or an online learning course. But then afterwards, you press a button and it breaks into tables. And so you can have that community space where there's 4 or 6 person tables, and you're sitting in a room, like a meeting room on Zoom, and you're having those smaller conversations. So it's an incredible platform, born out of COVID, truly, truly out of the mind of Stephanie. She's done a fantastic job running that company. And so, yeah, it's one of those products that I wish is somebody wants to take that over. It is a product that truly has the opportunity to go really far in the market. And it is for sale now. So if somebody does want to take that on, it is something that they can go on to QuietLight and purchase, and we can help transfer that over for them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Andrew. That number one is a beautiful story that comes from an important piece of, again, the beauty of the merger of human and technology, and surpassing the limitations. Like I said, I used to use a product called SignalWire for recording my podcast, because at the time, Zoom wasn't able to do bi-directional. So that was the problem, that it was if you talk and I talk, neither of us get on recorded. It's always one or the other. And SignalWire had solved a problem at the technology layer to be able to allow for bi-directional communication that meets in the wild and then lands in synchronicity at the other side. And they actually worked with, I think they partnered with Zoom, and underneath the covers, they've got some stuff that's in there. So, yeah, it's a really neat thing. But and the main reason was for me, because I could have a conversation where if 3 people start talking, it was okay, and then you would just keep going. Yeah. But the hardest thing that we had to do was undo people's habit of, like, they would start talking, they go, oh, sorry. Yeah. And then no one will talk. And then everyone talks, and then no one talks. Yeah. And it's like, no, just have a conversation. Like, you're in a room of people, and then the loudest person, suddenly they capture the audience, and they go, okay, we're gonna let Andrew run, and then I'll jump in with something. It's a much more fluid, natural experience of a conversation. So I'm hopeful for what we've got ahead, for what we can do. As you said, use it for good and tap into the expertise that's out there. So for folks that do want to connect and learn more about you and the team, Andrew, what's the way we can do that?
For me, it's on LinkedIn. That's where I post all of my content. It gets duplicated to Twitter, so you can still find me on Twitter, but I'm responding to messages mostly on LinkedIn. My team posts on LinkedIn and Twitter, but we also write case studies about all the AI stuff we talked about today. So if you head over to our website in the resource section, that's where you'll find a lot of the content that our engineers are writing about the products we're building, and I always think we're about 6 months ahead of what you're seeing on OpenAI or what's being talked about on some of the YouTube videos. So if you want to get a jump, our resource section is one of those great places to get a jump on what's being built for enterprise clients today.
And for folks that do want to go, of course, we'll have a link in the show notes as well. It is 923.co. So spelt out, of course, which I wish that the surprising number of times you have to do that. It's spelling out 923. But it's fantastic work. And thank you so much. I guess I said I knew the one thing I'm going to be disappointed by is how little time we've got to spend, because I know we could go on, and I really thank you for the time you spent today, Andrew. So there you go, folks. Check it out. 923 Studio, and Andrew and the team are fantastic. And Andrew, as a speaker, there's no doubt that you are a beauty and a joy to watch in giving a presentation and speaking spots. I've listened to some of your other podcasts as well, and so I knew it was a no-brainer. This was going to be a fun conversation. I really enjoyed the time we had together.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a great hour. I hope it creates a lot of content for everyone listening, but I appreciate your questions and your preparation in this. It was a pleasure to be on this podcast.
And also, you're the most well-read person. This it's very rare where I can hit 3 or 4 really odd under the cover references, and you knew everyone and went further. So you are a studied human, Andrew. It's fantastic to watch.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.